Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. Stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, episode number 246, presented by Marshall Communications, which is the creator of the 65-step Marshall Plan strategic process. With me today is my friend and guest, Jason Mudd of Axia Public Relations. He's CEO and managing partner there, and he's in Florida. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, that's right, Nancy. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And a shout out to all the PR Maven Nation that's out there.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, I've been wanting to have you on because you have made quite a name for yourself in the PR industry. And I wanted to have like a meeting of the minds. So this is going to be great today.
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you again for the opportunity.
So the World Communication Forum named Jason Mudd as North America's top PR leader in 2023. He is a trusted advisor and dynamic strategist to some of America's most admired and fastest growing companies, including American Airlines, Budweiser, Dave & Buster's, H&R Block, Hilton, HP, Miller Lite. I'm seeing some beer trending here. New York Life, Pizza Hut, Southern Comfort, oh yeah, that's good, and Verizon. He's the CEO and managing partner of Axia Public Relations. Forbes magazine named Axia Public Relations as one of America's best PR agencies. Jason is an accredited public relations practitioner, professional public speaker, author, podcaster, and entrepreneur. We have a lot in common, except for maybe that Forbes top. I mean, I need to strive for that as well as the World Communication Forum. So you've set the bar high here, Jason.
Thank you, Nancy. You're very kind. You know, they have to give those awards to somebody. So I guess it can be me sometimes. So,
Yeah.
and you another time for sure.
Okay. So tell us about your career on PR and how you got into it in the first place, Jason.
Sure. So, you know, I followed kind of what might be the more traditional path years ago of getting into PR, right? You start out in journalism and somehow you get converted over to the quote unquote dark side, right? So I started out in journalism. I was at the University of Missouri School of Journalism from Florida. I was born and raised in Fernandina Beach, went to Fernandina Beach High School, and you know, expressed interest in a career in journalism. And the journalists I knew said, well, if you're going to do journalism, you should go to the University of Missouri. And I literally went to a map to see where in the Midwest exactly was Missouri. Was it, you know, how far north was it, you know, because I'm a Florida boy. And it looked like it wouldn't be too bad. So I went ahead and made the leap and basically moved to Missouri to go to college. I didn't know a single person there. And while I was there studying journalism, I had to pay my way through school. So I had journalism jobs. And I was a recipient of a Rotary Club scholarship. And some Rotarians said, hey, there's this really good nonprofit that helps, you know, boys who have gotten themselves into legal trouble and, you know, kind of provides them. It was called Safe Harbor Boys Home. And they said, would you go out there and you know, kind of tell them, you know, give them some ideas of how they can build awareness for what they do. And as a journalist, I said, you know, that's not really what I do. No, thank you. You know, that just wouldn't be a good fit for me. And they're like, well, I'll tell you what, just go out there and meet with them. We'll give you $500 and you tell us what you think. And as a college student, and back then, $500 was a lot of money. So I said, sure, I'll go meet with somebody for $500. So I went out there, Nancy, and I fell in love with the cause. I fell in love with the kids. And, you know, just honestly, these were good kids who just fell into bad crowds or bad situations, and that were court ordered to stay at this home. And they were all about my age or maybe a little bit younger. And we just did fun things together and activities. And I thought, this is a story that needs to be told. So I went to my editor for the newspaper I was working for at the time. And I said, hey, this is what happened. You know, can I do this on the side, or how would you feel? And they said, it's fine. You just can't leverage your inside access and information at the newspaper for their benefit. You can certainly, introduce them to one of our writers, but you can't, work them into stories you're working on and things like that. And I totally agreed. Ethics is obviously very important to me. And so started doing that. And I just became really passionate about it. Simultaneously, this was actually right before I started the University of Missouri. And when I applied for the university, they started kind of recruiting me because I had quite a clipbook and quite a portfolio as a journalist before I got there. Well, long story short, the first day I showed up, and I said, "Hey, I'm here. I need that job you were telling me about. Where is it?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, that job thing. Why don't you come back in 2 or 3 days, and we'll give you all the details then." And it was very clear to me they had not lined up a job for me. So I came back a few days later, and they said, "Well, guess what? You can sign up for work study, and you can work for the J School." And so I started working for the J School, doing tours and helping with the Career Center and helping with alumni relations and recruiting. And, the evil genius behind the curtain immediately wanted me to start doing PR for the school, and kind of covertly started slowly and slowly moving me in that direction. So a combination between helping out Safe Harbor Boys Home and helping out the university School of Journalism made me realize that PR is actually kind of cool. And instead of reporting somebody else's agenda, you get to help them create an agenda and messaging and advocate on their behalf to do that. And I've really never looked back, Nancy. It's really appealing to me, the strategy of it and the advocacy of it, but still honing in on those news skills and writing skills that I was really passionate about.
Well, that's a fascinating story, and I love the way that you got started by, helping a nonprofit from an early age or an early
Yeah.
time in your career.
Yeah. I was 18 years old, and college bound, and just didn't feel like what I was called to do. But I guess I would tell young people or younger professionals, I'd say, don't miss an opportunity because it might be your calling.
That's right. Yeah. That's fascinating. So, when did you start did you work for another agency before you started your own?
Barely. So I interned one summer at an agency. It was funny because it was right around the time I was going through this leaving journalism kind of timeline. So the internet was new when I first started my career. So it was 1994. I was working on a news story, and the research librarian at the newspaper said, "Well, why don't you get on that computer? It's connected to the internet." And I'm like, "What's the internet?" And so, I click on, I think it was Mozilla, one of the first web browsers, and I just start surfing the web. And I sat at that computer. In my mind, it was at least 4 hours. It might have been longer. And that night, I literally went home and was like, "This is going to change the world." And it was that moment that I actually decided to move into PR and corporate storytelling because I saw the power of what it was going to be. And so at some point I was offered an internship at a daily newspaper helping their launch their first web product. And then I was also simultaneously offered an internship at a PR agency. And I was really torn. That was really the moment. And so I had to tell the newspaper, "Look, I've already launched one newspaper on the web before. I had done that the previous year. And so now I was at a point where I was like, kind of did that already. Let me do something I've never done before." So I was an intern at a PR agency for a hot minute, a semester, and learned a lot. And then never really thought I would. Honestly, I didn't think I'd own an agency. I didn't think I would be an entrepreneur. But my others in my life knew I would be eventually. So yeah, I'm sure you can relate to that, Nancy.
Yeah, definitely. I have an older brother who was working for Sikorsky Aircraft in Connecticut in the security, and he was just kind of a rank and file person in the security office. And I was like, "Don't you even just want to try to be the boss of the security?"
Right.
And he just lit into me like, not everybody has to be the boss like you. And I'll never
That's
forget
right.
that conversation. And so I just let it go. I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
just do your
yeah.
thing and I'll do mine.
Well, and just so you know, I stumbled in like I think most agency owners do into being an agency owner, or that's what a lot of people say. And for me, I was VP of PR and marketing communications for a nonprofit, and they were kind of positioning me to take over the nonprofit one day, and that one day came a lot faster than I thought it would, and it just for a series of reasons, it just wasn't the right thing for me at the right time. And so I kind of started making a list of what do I want to do. And the number thing that kept coming back on the list was I'm really good at PR. And so how do I go about making that, turning that into a service and making that available for others? And, it's funny when we had agencies that I was, kind of supervising and working with when I was on client side, it was often I felt underwhelmed by them and their, over promise, under deliver, all sizzle, no meat kind of approach. Yet they were growing fast. These agencies were growing fast and getting all kinds of awards. And, but I also, from my internship and other things, just felt like there's got to be a better model for an agency where um, clients have a better experience, employees are treated better, and ultimately, allowing for a better employment experience and a better client experience. So, with that, after having in-house experience, I launched an agency and probably had a lot of success because I didn't do it the way everybody else did, and I wasn't indoctrinated, if you will. And I was looking to kind of disrupt, and that was our competitive advantage. But now that's been 20 years ago, so obviously it's worked out.
Yes, obviously, you've had a lot of success. So, Jason, what are some common PR mistakes that people make when they don't have a professional agency like yours or mine helping them?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that most people don't know what PR is, and that's not lost on me. The irony that the industry that's best at building awareness and educating consumers and all this has deals with its own identity crisis. But the problem is that most people don't know what PR is, and when they do PR, they typically do it wrong, and so that makes things even worse. So I think it's really important that you have a trusted advisor, and that's what a good PR person is. um, and to that end, I think it's important that you find someone that understands you, that aligns with your values, who can be your kind of your Jiminy Cricket, if you will, in your ear, kind of giving you advice. And one of our first large clients we worked with, the basically the chief marketing officer equivalency there, she told me once. She said, "Look, it's not because you guys are good at getting results because we expect you're going to get results. The reason we keep using Axia is because you know us and we share similar values, and we can bring you into confidential matters and you can give us discreet and advice and counsel that we value highly." And so she was like, the results are always going to be there. You're good at PR. You know how to get attention. You know how to do those things. But what we value most is the counsel that you bring and the confidentiality that we can trust you with. And that was really honestly like a wake up call to me to go, we are good at that. And that is very valuable. And so I took that to a couple of our other clients to ask them how they felt. And they all agreed. Um, and just kind of added to it, in different ways. And one client even said, you're kind of this, for good or bad, you're this insurance policy for us. So, and they're like, number one, if things go bad and we get egg on our face and PR doesn't look good or PR is not working, no offense, Jason, but I can save my shirt and say, you know what, you're right, boss, this didn't go well. I fired that PR agency. We're never going to work with them again. But I still get to keep my really well paying, high powered job at the company. Right. So, and I was like, you know what, I'll fall on a sword for you. That's okay. You pay a good retainer to us. Right. But at the end of the day, it's kind of true. Like big companies hire outside counsel, whether it's a CPA firm or an auditing firm or a law firm to protect them. And when they screw up, they cut ties with that group to save face for themselves. And And that's okay, as long as we're all realize it's just business.
That's right. Well, you touched on a couple things I want to comment. One is that trust factor. I talk a lot about how clients need to know you, they need to like you, and ultimately they need to trust you to want to do their PR. So having someone who trusts you, not only the confidentiality, but that you're going to give them good advice, that's really important. And I actually think that so many people think that PR is only about like the media pitching aspect, but obviously there's so much more than that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. In fact, we're always trying to correct that thought process, because that's what everybody thinks, So I think PR is all about, I used to joke parties, press releases, and tea times at both high tea and golf times at the country club,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And while that sounds like a great life, PR is a lot more strategic than that when it's done well. And that's why I prefer to never call ourselves publicists, because in my mind, that's what publicists do. And public relations practitioners are really strategists and advisors on overall corporate communications. So, and back to your point, Nancy, not only do you need an agency that you like, know, and trust, but that's the exact behavior, or buying pattern or buyer journey, buyer's diagram that consumers are going through as well when they're making a purchasing decision. So behind every B2B transaction, I've heard someone say, is a B2C relationship, right? And so when, every consumer every business person is a consumer in the marketplace, and every consumer wants to know, do I like them? Do I trust them? Do I want to do business with them? Do they understand my problem? Have they solved it for others? Can they solve it for me? And do I trust them to do it? That's that subconscious buying process that they're going through. And so I think whether, if you're selling washing machines, you need to be thinking about that same approach. Or if you're providing landscaping services, you have to go through, your marketing should answer those types of questions. Your communications should answer those types of questions.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's about building a personal brand that your superpower is out there. And one of my superpowers is helping my clients connect. I'm
Yes,
a connector, and I
Yes.
love helping my clients make connections too. And so I think a personal brand is people know you're going to deliver on your promise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once you identify what your superpower is, you need to sing it from the mountaintops so everybody knows what it is.
There you go. And you won't know what your superpower is until you put yourself in positions and situations, perhaps, that you're not usually in. And that's when you can really see what you're made of and where your strengths are.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny because you and I both went through the training with heroic public speaking this past year. And through the process of developing my keynote, I developed stories about my own personality starting when I was 3. I was like the most extroverted kid in the preschool.
I can't imagine that, Nancy. I can't imagine.
And back then I thought everybody was like that, but I guess over
Right.
time I realized that was kind of a unique trait that I had.
You probably thought, what's wrong with all these people? Did they not wake up on the right side of the bed today?
So yeah, speaking of heroic public speaking, you were in the cohort that was the one just prior to mine, but both of us have been through this training on keynote speaking and TED Talks. And have you been giving any speaking engagements?
Well, I've been doing a lot of podcast appearances and presentations, but not a lot of in-person type things. Not because of the pandemic at all, but just because of just the opportunities that have been presenting themselves have been to do more sessions, with a broader audience and do it remotely, which is great because, as you know, traveling right now is less than desirable.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's a good chance your flight's going to get canceled or at least delayed. And it's just been really not a lot of fun to travel in the last year or so.
I have a son who's a pilot for NetJets, and of course he does private aviation, but I can't afford it. It's like $30,000 to fly one way across country.
Exactly. Sure is. That's right. Yes.
So, Jason, what are some PR topics, tips, and trends that you're most passionate about?
Yeah, that's a great question. We cover a lot of that on our podcast on top of PR. That's really what we're there to talk about, our topics, tips, and trends. I think uh, one of the things that I'm very enthusiastic about is our five core values, which is integrity, ideas, relationships, results, and improve. And one of the things we're spending a lot of time right now on is not only obviously talking regularly about integrity, but we're also focused on improvement and kind of identifying the things we can do to improve. And so as an agency, it's very interesting. We really focus on news, social, and web content at our agency. And I've been spending a lot of time bouncing back and forth between those three practice areas. Kind of like there's a story about Walt Disney, and he was giving a tour allegedly to some school age children. So he took them to the art department, took them to the finance department, took them to the production department, took them to the innovation department, took them to sound, and took them to the creative department and all this stuff. And so one kind of smart aleck kid at the end said, "Hey, this is a great tour, but you showed us everything, Mr. Disney, but so what do you do if you have all these employees?" And Disney, the consummate creative, he said, "Well, I'm kind of like a honeybee. I go in and I pollinate each department until I feel like I've helped it get better, and then I move on to the next department and help it get better, and then I move on to the next department." And so, around 2006, when my business had really grown from nothing to a fully staffed, departmentalized organization, I found myself going, "What do I do here?" Nowadays. And I kind of heard that story maybe right around that same time. And that's kind of what I found myself doing, was going from department to department. So the point is, to answer your question, the topics, tips, and trends really is, I find myself getting in the trenches with my team and helping them out and helping them kind of raise what we're doing to the next level. And so, for example, lot of times this quarter I've been spending with. So earlier, the beginning of this quarter, I was spending a lot of time with our news practice, our news team. And when we think about news, we're thinking about obviously earned media coverage. We're thinking about speaking engagements. We're thinking about awards and getting on podcasts. So I really spent some time with them figuring out, okay, what tools do we use? What tools do we need? What tools don't we need? How do I help you be more successful? So I really came in and helped us improve our outputs and our outcomes for our clients for that. And then I moved into our social media team and helped them do that. I'm kind of in the process of doing that. And I think the web team knows I'm coming, and they know I'm next. So, kind of like Deion Sanders, when he was named coach at Colorado, he kept saying, "I'm coming, I'm coming." And I think they know I'm coming. And that's exciting because we've got some exciting new work coming as well next quarter for our web team. And so I hope they're right now sharpening their axe and improving their game. So when I show up, I won't have to stay there very long.
Yeah. Well, it's all about having great content that's really targeted at your target audience. So
Yeah, and a great team to put it together, right? So we've been talking. Speaking of tips, our trends, we've been talking a lot about AI, and we just did an episode on AI for my podcast, and it's gotten a lot of great feedback from people in the industry who are like, "This is a great explainer of the practicality of using AI in business, and specifically not for people who don't work in IT or don't work in AI." And so I was giving examples of it. I think the episode was called "How We're Using AI in Our Agency and How You Can Use It Too." We covered 6 things in it, and I bring that all up just to mention that AI is really exciting, and but in no way is it going to replace the value of a PR professional, the value of having a writer, because AI will never be human, and therefore it lacks empathy, it lacks relationships, it lacks those things we talk about, being liked, known, and trusted, right? You can trust software, you can like software, but you can't really have a relationship with software, right? And I think the people who have to worry about their jobs, aren't going to be the PR professionals that are good at what they do. The problem is going to be if you put garbage in, garbage out. If you give the AI device or platform bad input, it's going to give you bad output. But even when you get good at giving it an input, it's still, at least in its current phase, at best, an intern, right? So you've got kind of intern or entry level qualities and quality that it's putting out. And so one of the struggles with AI right now is you get an output, but that output still needs to be rewritten. It needs to be reworked. It needs to be, in many ways redone, kind of like having an unpaid intern, right? And so I find that, if you're, let's just say if you're a writer, if your writing skills are here, which is I'm gonna show you in a minute. And let's say, and Nancy, somebody on your team or my team, their writing skills are up here, right? If your writing skills are down here, AI is only going to give you this. So it's hard for AI to be a useful tool for you because it's going to produce quicker content, but not better quality content. Then you've got to act like an editor and figure out how do you elevate it up to here. But if you're not a great writer or editor, how are you going to get something that's at your level up to the next level, right? And so we use AI to generate first drafts, rough drafts that need to be fact checked, that need to be cited and sourced often, that need to be rewritten, that need to be checked to make sure they're not plagiarized, make sure it's not, copywritten content or duplicate content. And that takes a lot of work. So sometimes AI is not as helpful as you might think it is, but it's getting better with each release. So anyway, we talked about the six things you need to do as you think about using AI at your company. Maybe you'll put a link to it in the episode notes. But otherwise, yeah, AI is very fascinating. There seems to be like, two strong camps, those that have embraced it and are using it, and those that just think it's going to be the worst thing that's ever happened, and they're afraid of it, or they don't recommend it, or they're embarrassed to use it. For us, we're proactively out there saying, hey, we are using it, but we're using it very cautiously, very ethically, and we have, policies and guidelines that we're using.
Yeah, I like comparing it to an unpaid intern. That's awesome.
Yeah. I borrowed this from a friend of mine. We call ours Janet, like from The Good Life.
Oh,
or
yeah.
The Good Place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
I definitely borrowed that or stole it from her.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more with Jason Mudd.
Sprague & Curtis is a locally owned real estate company. We're primarily focused in central Maine. I got excited about Nancy's book because she's so well known in the area for her marketing and branding techniques, and we're always looking to expand and learn and grow. And so a lot of us here at the office decided that we wanted to read her book and learn some new techniques.
It benefits Sprague & Curtis to have a large brand and audience because there can often be multiple years between transactions with clients, so it's important to network with them and stay in touch with them in those in-between periods. And this book really helped us learn some techniques and methods to continue to do that. We organized a small book group with Nancy's book with brokers in our office this winter to share information and remind ourselves how important it is to always be working on our network and continually reaching out to our customers.
Platforms like social media are important in expanding your business, but equally as important are handwritten notes, cards, letters. She inspired me to send her a note of appreciation, just thanking her for the book and her insight. In reading Nancy's book, I was excited to look to continue to grow our brand and our audience. I think she does a great job of motivating us.
Nancy's book really helped me learn a few things in marketing and branding and how important it is to stay on top of reaching out to clients periodically, staying top of mind, providing useful information, and really telling our story as a company.
Well, nice to see you back again, Jason. Thanks for not running away.
Yeah, I love that little commercial. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, it all started with me getting a note in the mail, and I called them up. I said, would you be willing to do a little video for me? And yeah, it turned out great.
Yeah.
And it's so Maine that they have like a potluck supper, and everybody made something, and they brought it into the office to discuss the book. So
Yeah, very cool.
So, Jason, what is the difference between PR and advertising, and how do they work together?
I would jokingly say one works and the other doesn't, but that's not true. We both know that. The difference between PR and advertising there's several. One is that obviously you're in a lot more control with advertising, right? So you can control a little bit of the timing, a little bit of the frequency and the messaging, and things like that. Where PR, you're really depending on a third party to give you a third party endorsement, or to write something about your organization themselves. And the credibility in PR is that third party, is that independence, is that lack of control. Some people can't handle not having that control, right? They want to know exactly what's going to happen and what they're going to get for their money and how they're going to be able to tangibly, see it and experience it. The problem is that consumers have trained themselves to tune out and ignore advertising. Nobody turns on the television. People turn on television to be informed and entertained. They don't turn on the television and say, I wonder who's advertising tonight. Unless it's the Super Bowl, right? Then that's a whole different story. But research also shows most people don't even remember who the advertiser was. They just remember the thematic or the entertainment value of each commercial. Oftentimes, actually, research shows it attributes it to your competitor and not you. And so they show the more you advertise, the more you move volume for the entire industry, not just for yourself. That doesn't mean that advertising doesn't have a role, because, like we talked about earlier, PR is synonymous with earned media coverage or getting news coverage. And there wouldn't be news outlets if there weren't advertising. And so advertising plays obviously an important role. Years ago, when I first started the agency, there was a book released called The Fall of Advertising and Rise of PR. And when I read that book, I thought to myself, this is my platform also. And I wish I would have written this book first, because I completely agree with it. And the idea is that you build a brand using PR, and then once you've built your brand, then you use advertising to support it. And so Tesla, Target, and Starbucks are perfect examples of strong brands with great reputations who never once bought an ad until they reached a certain point where they were, well known already, and then they used advertising to support it. And even today, Starbucks is not a heavy advertiser, and nor is Target, and Tesla still does not advertise. So those are some differences of how they work. How do they work together? The example I would give you is that we're always playing around with what I call levers in our organization, and this is just speaking about Axia ourselves, because I don't want to speak, about any of our clients without their permission. But for us, we use levers. And so by levers, I mean, we've got, a pay-per-click campaign going. We've got our own PR campaign going. I'm speaking, we're entering awards, and we're just creating all this visibility. Well, every once in a while, I try to disrupt that process and say, hey, let's stop doing something, or let's do less and try to accomplish more. So doing less means we're more focused, and then therefore we might be able to do more or get more value out of it. And so for a while, I kind of disrupted our engine a little bit, and I started removing pieces from the equation. So we actually cut back on the number of episodes of podcasts we were producing. We cut back on our Google AdWords spend and things like that. And we cut back on the amount of PR we were doing for ourselves. And then we noticed, hey, wait a minute, our inbound leads are down, right? What happened? And so then we started slowly adding things back. What we've discovered is it doesn't seem to matter what we cut, or I'm sorry, what we bring back. It needs everything. It needs a holistic approach to work its best. And so we tested that hypothesis again this year. And I would argue, honestly, to the detriment of our company's growth and success, because it wasn't until we had like all 6 of those levers fully turned on that our leads started coming in a lot more than they were before. So it doesn't seem to be one thing. And that was the podcast recording I did on my own show just yesterday. It hasn't gone live yet. We just recorded it yesterday. But that's actually what the guest and I agreed upon, is you need this holistic approach. And so you can have paid media going, you can have PR going, you can be doing search and optimization, you can do all these things. But unless you're doing all of them at once, it just doesn't seem to work as well. And it sounds crazy, but it's true. And I think it's because consumers are online as much as they're offline, or maybe online more so. And at the end of the day, maybe getting ahead of ourselves here, but the nice thing about PR is that when you're doing paid media or advertising, as soon as you turn it off, it's over. There's no more Google AdWords being served. Your ads not running on the air. Your billboard's not in the sky. But with PR, and again, not to just rely on earned media and media coverage, but you're still coming up in Google News for a year after that article appeared, right? You're still in that magazine for the rest of the month, if you will. And so, the nice thing is PR has a nice shelf life. Ads don't get indexed on Google and searched up for later unless somebody's paying to do that. And so that's something I think we have to be mindful of.
Well, you've been talking about what I call the marketing mix, essentially.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
PR and advertising, how do they fit into the marketing mix overall?
Yeah, that's right. Then I think it's best done together with your first dollars, I think, going into PR. And that's not because I'm biased and in the PR industry. There's data that proves it. I tell our clients all the time, the companies that are with us the longest are the ones that get the most value out of their PR program. And we can document that through our results reports. So, PR is not, I think we both know who Tony Mikas was. And he had a saying, and I use it all the time: PR is not instant or overnight, but it's the most powerful way to build your brand.
Well, that leads right into my next question: is why is PR more of a long game than advertising?
Yeah, well, because PR has a lot more credibility. People tend to remember the things they read and consume than quick sound bites or quick hit messages on the ads that can just be overwhelming and cluttering. And I don't know about you, but most people tend to turn off or turn down whatever they're consuming when the ads are streaming or coming across or whatever. So commercials just don't really work, but you do, depending on your model, if you need to be in front of people, do it. I've always found it fascinating, Nancy, that, when we think of advertising, we typically think of law firms and automobiles, right? Those are two of the heaviest industry, and retailers, of course. But in the auto industry, only 2%, meaning what, 1 in 50 people are in the market to buy a car at any given time. But look at all that advertising you see, right? You would think 100% of the marketplace is in the market for a car all the time. And so here's a great example of how to do PR a little bit differently, if you will. So when we were working with an automobile dealership group, they told us that factoid, 2% of the market of the population is in the market to buy a car at any given time. Not a lot of people. So their idea is, let's do mass advertising to reach that 2%. I said, but then I just kept listening and I went to conferences and stuff. And then I heard another stat, which is 40% of people will buy a new car within 6 months of buying a new home. The psychology there is they've been saving their money for a down payment. They've been protecting their credit score so they get the best interest rate. Once they have that house, they want a new car to go with this new house. They finally accomplished their house. It's weird. They finally got the home they've been wanting. Now, to reward their hard work, it's not just the house. Now they want a car to go with it. So when I heard, okay, so you can go after 2% of the market and spend a lot of money doing it, or you can go more targeted after 40% of the market, where would you put your money, Nancy?
I would go after the 40% of the market.
Yeah. So I said to the automobile dealership group, how do we go about finding, and I already knew the answer, but like a good attorney, you don't ask a question unless you know the answer. How do we go about finding who are new homeowners in the communities or the cities that you serve, the metropolitan areas? Well, I knew how to get that list. So we got that list, and then we created a program around reaching out to these new homeowners to celebrate and congratulate and to, basically recognize them and congratulate them on their new home and start building a relationship with them over time. And what they said to me was, they said, hey, this works great, but it takes a lot more work than just writing a check. And I was like, it does, but let's look at conversion rates, And so, it's kind of one of those things. We used to work for a personal injury attorney, one that spends millions of dollars on advertising. And we would get them these segments on the morning show in their, in the markets they serve. And they would say, man, these morning shows are great, but do we really have to be there at 7 a.m.? I'm like, well, that's why it's called a morning show, And finally, the owner just said to me, he said, look, I'd just rather write another big check to the TV station and not have to worry about getting up so early.
Oh,
right?
wow.
Yeah. And I told him, and then he would get upset when the smaller law firms are monopolizing the airtime of being there and being in studio and answering legal questions. He's like, those guys don't know what they're talking about. Like, well, what is it they say about business? Half of it's just showing up.
Yeah,
And that's
right.
what's happening here. So, yeah.
Is there a book, an app, or a podcast that you have, other than your own, of course, but that you have found particularly helpful in your business, and why?
Good question. I loved reading 4 Hour Work Week around 2006, 2007-ish. In fact, I read it multiple times, and I read it every year for a while, mostly just because I'm an efficiency nerd. I love life hacks. I love running my business more and more efficiently. So when I meet somebody who hasn't read that book, which is a lot of people, I tend to recommend it to them. And then a couple years later, he came out with 4 Hour Body, and I ended up losing about 40 pounds
Wow.
from kind of following some of the advice in that book. I wish I could lose 40 pounds again, but it's not happening as easily. But yeah, that book was helpful, and the author says in it, the title 4 Hour Work Week is what my publisher wanted me to do. He said, I'm not suggesting you can literally work 4 hours a week, but you should be thinking about how do you get the most out of working less time. And I talked about that a little bit earlier about doing more by doing less, or getting
Right.
more done by doing less.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the theme of that book. So that's one of my all-time favorite business books. I also I love reading about leadership and culture. I'm a student of those two things. I used to think that culture was just something that somebody made up because they wanted to feel good at work. And now I'm a complete advocate for it. So I'm a big believer in that. But I would just say always keep reading something and consuming something. I walk 3 miles a day. That's probably my secret of what I would recommend to people. And on those walks, I'm either doing phone calls, audiobooks, podcasts, or something to kind of keep me, thinking and all that stuff. The problem is sometimes I have to stop and bust out my phone to capture an idea, that I have while I still have it. But I've created some apps and tools to help me keep walking while I'm doing that. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure that walking time is really key to your success as well.
There's a big difference in my lifestyle when the days I'm too busy to walk. And I can feel it. So this morning I got up nice and early, had a nice 3-hour walk. I'm in Florida, Nancy. So it's, what is it? Right now we're recording this in late June. It's currently 90 degrees out. And so in the winters, I take it, I take it during the hottest part of the day, so I can get as much sun and all that stuff. And the summers, you got to get up early to do it. I like to take my my Yorkie named Oscar with me, but if it's over 80, he's out. He's got the spirit to want to do it, right? But his body's not willing.
So you said 3 miles or 3 hours?
Oh my gosh, did I say that? 3 miles every day. It takes about an hour to do it with the dog because he's a little bit slower than me. Small Yorkie, that's a long walk for a small Yorkie. But yeah, no, 3 miles for 1 hour, although it would be lovely to go have the time to go for a 3 mile
Yeah,
walk,
right.
or 3-hour walk. I did that in March, actually. I walked a 15K with some business friends, other CEO friends of mine. We walked what's called the National Championship 15K. We were not competing for the championship, by the way. We were just walking. But it's the world's largest 15K, or 9.3 miles. And it went by in a flash, even though it was 3 hours, because we were just sharing business advice back and forth. And it was probably one of the most valuable conversations I've had in a long time. And I'm still using a lot of the things we learned during that session.
That's awesome. What a great idea.
Yeah. How about you, Nancy? What's something you recommend?
Oh, what do I recommend? Well, right now I'm reading the book about brandscaping by Andrew Davis.
Yes.
And I really am enjoying it. He's a big advocate for content marketing and using content to increase demand. But I'm a little mad at Andrew Davis because he totally disses the PR industry. And I don't think he really understands it, because he kind of keeps talking about one-hit wonders as if PR agencies just produce like one media hit and then they're done. And I'm like, no, it's so much more than that. So I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to reach out to him and try to correct the record. So I on the one hand, I'm recommending that book, but beware of what he says about PR.
Two thoughts on that. One, Andrew Davis, I've met him in person. He reminds me of you, Nancy. He is an extrovert for sure, right? Number one, high energy guy. In fact, I think, maybe he'll listen to this, through search engine optimization or Google alerts. But, I think his high energy, actually, it's his natural style. So he should do that. But I sometimes wish he'd rein it in a little bit when he's speaking as a presenter, so that, he can have more substance and more, how do you say, the audience can track with him a little bit closer. But I would say, and I've shared this in other circles with other marketers, today's generation of marketers, they love thought leadership and they love content marketing, but PR has been doing that work for decades. And so I consider thought leadership and content marketing as being PR.
Yeah.
And so you said he's a big deal about content marketing. What he doesn't realize is that's the PR practice. It always has been. And just because they came up with a new name for it, when inbound marketing was termed, or content marketing was termed, right, doesn't mean it didn't exist before some tech heads decided to call it that. And so I tell people that all the time. PR professionals were the leaders when the internet came out. PR professionals were the leaders when social media came out. Nothing's changed. It's just other people have tried to put their hands in the kitty or in the pot, kind of thing. So I would flip it around that way, and I'd say, Andrew Davis, if you're listening, content marketing is PR and always has been.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would love it if Andrew would chime in. So, and then actually, I'll also invite Andrew to be my guest on the PR.
That's what I'm just going to say. You should have him as a guest, and you guys should have a civil debate about that topic. And you can quote me on that too.
All right, I'll do that. So, Jason, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I'm hard to find with the last name Mudd, because there's 3 or 4 other Jason Mudds out there. But I am the Jason Mudd, and most of my handles are Jason Mudd 9 on the number 9 on social media, because that's just my favorite number. Look at that; it magically appeared.
Yeah,
that's really awesome. Your elves are very talented.
Yes.
But anyway, there's another Jason Mudd that's an attorney, another one that's a doctor, another one that's an event marketer or something like that. But I'm the PR guy named Jason Mudd. Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. But if you do, customize your invitation. Look at that. Let them know that you saw me on the PR Maven podcast, and that you're part of the PR Maven Nation, and that you love Nancy Marshall, and we'll share the Nancy Marshall love together.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, this has been a lot of fun. I think we might have to do it again sometime, or maybe we'll have to do it on your podcast, just saying. But thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I was glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope something great happens to you and your audience today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the PR Maven podcast. I invite you to share a review of the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation on Facebook. It's free to join, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you use an Alexa device, use your Alexa app to search the Skills and Games section to find and enable the PR Maven Podcast Flash Briefing. This will give you access to exclusive content and more PR and marketing advice. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.